All right, we're recording. All right, so last week we talked about, was that last week? Yeah, today's Monday. Last week we did some refactoring of the Checkers app, okay? And you guys kind of saw how I went from something that worked to something that worked, but it was maybe a little clearer, right? So this week we're going to do some more refactoring, okay? But we're actually going to we're moving in a direction that's going to support what we eventually making this an interactive game. Okay, the goal will be, hopefully, it's only February, so hopefully by the end of this semester that we will have created a game that you can play with someone else on another computer. You guys can, play checkers with each other, because nobody's ever created a checkers game before, and the world needs, more. So, remind me, Jesse and Hope, and I can't remember who else, but Jesse and Hope, I need to talk with y'all after about KidFit. All right. So anyway, we wanted, that's where we're going. Okay. To get there though, I'm kind of looking ahead to what we're going to need to pass back and forth, between the computers so that so that they can maintain basically a shared state. Because really, once you move to the point of, let's say I'm playing Zoe in checkers, like whose board is the actual authoritative, or as we would say, in Christian, the canonical, representation of truth, right? What state is the board actually in? If we had a checkers board in between us, well, that would represent the state, okay? But now we're sitting on different computers, right? Now, in order for that to work, we're actually going to use a third computer, which will be a server, and that's generally the way that stuff like this works anyway. Some server sits there and it's running all the time, and it's just waiting for somebody to tell it to do something, and so it will maintain the board state, and we'll say, hey, move checker such and such to someplace, right? Does that make sense? Yeah? You guys with me? Right, checkerboard lives in some data structure on a server.
The checkerboard is alive?
Yes.
Whoa.
Yes, it's alive.
Kill it.
It exists, forgive me, it exists on some server somewhere, and then both of our computers simply represent the checkerboard that or the game state that exists and is held on the server. Okay, with that in mind, okay, at the end of last class, if we look at what we've got here, I may have gone back too far. Switch color, toggle, board CSS. Yeah, I don't have.
Are you going to share your screen?
I might at some point, but do you guys really need to see? Can I just describe it verbally? I'm pretty descriptive.
If you woke up at the screen, you could share it, but that probably would not be a good idea.
Oh, selected checker index. I think temp. Where's temp? Temp is way back there.
Caleb, I think you broke Luke.
I think we need to pretend with that.
Luke he's just still laughing at the last joke. I think that was.
Hey, give me the ransomware. Yeah, ransomware, that's what it was.
So.
You've been hit with ransomware.
Luke, you okay down there?
Rendered
Yes,
checkers.
yes,
added checkers JS.
Alexi. Oh, it's called. It starts with an N.
Hello, can you hear me?
Narcolepsy. I was close.
Said narcolepsy.
Nepalexy.
All right, sorry about the delay here. I think this is where we were at the end of last class. So, or it's very close to it. And we've got all these checkers in there. No, that. Did I have this big data structure? I did not have this big data structure in template.js, did I? This thing?
That's a good question. I don't know.
You guys looking at that, Jesse? Do you remember a great big old
You woke up.
checkers list? No, there wasn't anything like
Yeah.
that. No, I didn't think so. Okay, good.
All
All right. So then this is where we were, roughly. All right, so we'll go. I just need to.
I will be ready.
So here's a neat trick that you can do. Right now I'm on the master branch, okay? Which, yeah, I'm on the master branch, which is basically where we left off last class. However, there's one more commit that I want to get, and basically that was where we renamed red to white, okay? So you can actually, and it's on another branch. Now these branches, they look like they're one branch, because one just extends from the end of the other. Okay, master, like, but they really are kind of two different branches. And I just want to move forward one commit, right? So you can do what's called cherry picking. All right, so I'm going to cherry pick.
I'm gonna need a cherry picker truck.
Yeah, well, we just need get. Get solves all our problems. It is. You thought that Jesus was the answer? Get is the answer.
Global starvation.
Yes, global starvation can be caused because all you have to do is clone the repository. You just make a repository full of food. Boom, problem solved. Right. Okay.
What about
So
unemployment?
same thing. Repository full of jobs. All right. So we cherry picked the master branch on the master branch, renaming red to white.
It
Which-
looks more like a cactus.
So-
Little branches. Why isn't it called a cactus?
I don't know. It is. There's still branches. Maybe it is. Maybe it's a cactus.
Cactus.
All right.
It doesn't look
Back
like
to class. Here's the problem that we have when we look at this. We think where we want to eventually be. Okay. I've got board.js. I've got over here template.js. Okay. Yeah, this is about where we were. Right. I'm rendering these things. Okay. But where is the state of the game? Like, if I was to say, like, how could I maybe give you an idea for a second? How would I save a game?
The state is Virginia.
Yes. Thank you, Caleb. How would I save a game? Like there's
Send in a superhero.
send in a superhero. I mean, you couldn't even save the files because some of it is maintained kind of in memory, of what's going on in JavaScript at the time. So that's the problem right now is there's nothing that represents where all the checkers are and really when we think about about the game state for a checkers game, the checkers board's always the same, right? 8x8 grid with alternating colors, right? But the game state is simply represented by where are all the pieces, okay? So if we simply kept track of all the checkers in something, then we've got something that could potentially down the road be used to be passed back and forth between computers so that two people can play the checkers game. Make sense? So I need to be able to represent where all my checkers are. Right now, the only thing that represents where the checkers are is let me go to board HTML and open that up. Is the code the actual state of this HTML document, right? But an HTML document, like I said already, it's not something I can save very easily. And even still, there's some things about it that are not obvious. But at least this would let me know if I could somehow save the state of the document. I could know where all the checkers were, right? And based on where the checkers are, there's not really much more. So that would be theoretically possible. It would be to save off this, but not feasible and not helpful. Okay, so we are going to move in the direction of being able to save the state of the checkers. Okay, and it's interesting. It actually simplifies a lot of the way that we need to think about what needs to happen and about our code. Right. So if you think between and it actually allows us to do some cool things. Like right now, I still have to click through, right? But when we get done with this, we should be able to click on this guy right here, and then click here, and he'll just move from one to the other. So it'll make the movement easier as well, because we'll be able to keep track of things like which checker is selected, right? So we can select a checker, and then based on where we click after that, either moves him to a different place or whatever. Okay? Make sense? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a bunch of, we're going to create a data structure or an array. You guys remember arrays from JavaScript way back in the day? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, an array is nothing more than a list. You guys know what lists are, right? Yeah, all right. So an array is a fancy word for a list. And in fact, in Java, we did the very nice thing of going back to just calling them lists, okay, which was kind of nice. So it's just a list, okay, but the one thing to remember about arrays is they are ordered lists, okay? So it's an array, and it's almost like there's a bunch of slots, kind of like a sheet of paper, really, and where each line on the sheet of paper has a number, right? And you can put something kind of anywhere you want in that array, okay, as long as there's a line. You couldn't say, put, Amy's name on line 50 of this piece of paper, because if there aren't 50 lines. That makes sense? You would get what's called an array out of bounds exception, and your computer program would stop, okay? But as long as there's lines, you can put them anywhere you want. So you could have blank lines in there and stuff like that. Generally, you don't want blank lines. You want it to be all together because it's easier to think about it and to work with it, okay? So we're going to create our list of checkers. What do you think we should call this list of checkers?
Bacon.
Well, that is a good idea, a very good idea, I would say. But we're going to go with something maybe just almost as good, and we'll call it checkers. All right, so it's a variable, and we'll call it checkers. And an array in JavaScript simply looks like these little brackets, okay?
Okay.
Hello?
So
Hello.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
You've been hit with ransomware.
All right, let me
What does that mean?
let me give you guys an example of an array here real quick, just so that as a refresher. Oops. I is less than checkers dot length I plus plus. All right. Oh, int is a Java thing. All right.
Who have you joked being confused though?
Yeah.
Confused and Confucius.
Ah. Did you know that?
You never even give us points.
Do you know that? I know.
Yeah.
Well, that's John's job.
I'm giving you
John
points.
is supposed to be giving you guys points for all those.
I'm giving you points.
So-
I'm just not putting them up on the board. Okay.
Did you know that Confucius said that? Confucius. Confucius said
Listen to me.
that he who farts in church sits in his own pew.
I hope so.
What did you say? Wow.
Yeah, that was always my favorite one.
What?
What did you say?
He who farts in church sits in his own pew.
Oh.
Confucius said that.
Oh, good.
Very good.
But and that one has been recorded for all your parents.
I feel like that one.
My dad
laughed so much at what you said.
That's all right.
I just took a point off for
He also said that
Wait.
he who's-
How come we lose points for the teachers?
because it's
Jokes.
still bad.
Oh, that's true. We're all a team working together to get more points. All
I
right.
don't think that's fair.
Yeah, all right.
All right. He also said that he who sleeps in the road is tired.
Oh my goodness, that's horrible.
That one's good. It's good in a bad way. All right.
No
So-
one heard your joke.
All right. So I've built this little array here, and I'm just going to demonstrate how they work. Okay. Now you guys know for loops. We've already talked about for loops, right? So I'm going to create a little index for this loop called I, and we're going to iterate it, one at a time, all the way up to the length of the checkers array, which should be 10. All right. I've got the numbers 1 through 10 in there. Okay. And then I'm just going to print them out. Okay, so what am I going to see? Someone describe for me what I'm going to see.
A paper coming out of a printer.
Okay, not quite, because it's going to be printed to the console. But it'll say checkers. What's the first? Checkers what?
Checkers 0.
Checkers 0 is equal to, and what will be the first number that comes out?
1.
Checkers 0 equal to 1, and so we should see checkers 1 is equal to, checkers 2 equals 3, so on and so forth. Yeah, say that 3 times real fast. All right, so checkers. Checkers.
Chuckle over here.
Yep. If you stay out in the sun too long, you'll get checkers. All right. Or maybe if your checkers board stays out in the sun too long, it'll get checkers. All right. So here we go. And that's exactly what we see. Checkers 0 equals 1, checkers 1 equals 2, checkers 2 equals 3, so on and so forth. Okay. Now, the important thing to remember here is arrays are indexed, are 0 indexed. So the first number in an array is 0, or the first element in the array has an index of 0. The second has an index of 1, and so on and so forth. Okay. And we even call it the 0th element, the 1th element, the 2th element, and then we go on to 3rd, 4th, 5th. Okay. But often they will use that kind of wonky expression to be very clear that we're not talking about the element. Right. So anyway, that, and if we change those numbers around, in an opposite order, we would get the
I
reverse.
have a
Yeah.
genuine question. Why do they start at 0?
It
Is
actually
being mean.
no, it actually makes a lot of the math and things like that a whole lot easier.
Because Bob.
What?
Because they want it to be special.
And then
Because he was a 0.
All right. So you can put
In memory of Bob.
just about anything you want in an array. Okay. So I put some strings in there, dog, frog, log. Okay. Okay. And that's fine. Okay. So it's just a line on the paper that I can write whatever I want in. Okay. And the line doesn't have necessarily have a size. All right. So you can imagine that line going on forever. Okay. I could write as much as I want in there.
That'd be terrible
Okay.
for the person who has to learn that script.
It would be, especially if one was really long and made your paper really wide. All right, so the back to checkers. So let's go ahead and add some checkers in here. Okay. Now I'm going to. I don't know if we've used JSON yet. Have we? We probably haven't used any JSON yet. Okay.
Why don't we use some Caleb? Jason.
JSON. Yeah, some people actually call it JSON. But often people will call it JSON to make it to differentiate. JSON is yes, ma'am.
Can we give it a last name?
Yeah, Hokum.
Okay.
JSON Hokum, because we need another Hokum in here.
I was gonna say Jason Gray
Jason Gray.
because that actually is a person.
Oh, okay.
Oh, Jason.
JSON stands for here, and I'll just write it in here. JSON is JavaScript Object Notation. Okay, JavaScript Object Notation, and you actually sometimes have actually seen it, and probably haven't even really noticed it. But you start an object with brackets, okay, and then you just simply put elements in there like row, 1, and cell 2. Oops.
These are some really big cells.
So let
Those are usually
object equal. All right.
Jail cell.
So now I've got this object, okay, and it has a row of 1 and a cell of 2. Okay. Pretty straightforward, and it's just in Java we basically call these a map. There's a key and a value.
Is there a
Okay.
treasure hidden?
No. Yes, that's a good one. Yeah. Yes, everybody sing that now. We can all have that stuck in our head for the rest of the day. The Doro map song. I'm the map. 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 Yeah. Yeah. So you guys, I want you all to be thinking about that the rest of the day. But these objects can then be passed around. It's just a collection of variables that go together. Okay, like the row and column for a specific checker. So I might have,
I was gonna say peanut butter and jelly.
Well, if you had a sandwich,
All
you could
those
have,
go together.
you know,
Peanut butter and jelly.
you could have bread, and then you could specify what the bread was, like white bread, and then you could have topping, or you might even have,
Topping on a bread.
yeah, No, what I'm talking about is like, like
Well,
bread.
The toppings you refer to like ice cream.
yeah, but
And you don't.
Bread,
Filling?
chocolate, like ice cream.
okay, we can call it filling. All right, so here you go. So your bread is white,
That makes it sound
And-
like a donut.
or are we doing whole wheat? And then,
No. No,
all right, so here's our sandwich, and then we'll call it filling, right? What is in our? Whoops, I ended up. Is everybody? It is noon.
I want to throw up from all this.
All right,
If you do, don't throw up on any of us.
so
Don't throw up on the paper.
PB.
Hey, if you do throw up on mine, then it won't have to
All right.
go on the work.
All right, so here we go. Here's an object that represents a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Okay, I have a sandwich. It tells me what kind of bread it is, and then it's got fillings. Okay, and the fillings are peanut butter and jelly. Okay, now you see that I've got, in this case, I actually have an array inside of an object, and that's totally okay. You could even put another object inside of the object. Okay,
So you can make
You can-
put like bits of peanut in the peanut butter.
right? You could even have
And
yeah.
it'd be crunchy peanut butter.
I mean, if you wanted to get into, we could make this as. So here's our peanut butter and here's our jelly, and but maybe the jelly would be the name of this filling is jelly, right?
You have two E's in there.
Nimmy. The name is jelly, but the ingredients
Sugar and fruit.
include
And water.
And
sugar.
stuff to make it gel.
Um,
Jelly ingredients.
And fruit, no, it's fruit juice and sugar and to make it gel.
high fructose corn syrup.
All that.
Also
Lactic
called
acid.
All right. Dot. But you guys see how now I've taken all this stuff,
Right?
okay, these details and all this information about a sandwich, but I've kind of packaged it all up into one thing that I just call sandwich, and I can then, it's now all assigned to one variable, right? And even IntelliJ it recognizes that I can think about the whole thing as just sandwich, okay? So I'm passing my sandwich around, and you don't think about, in fact, in real life, we use these kind of abstractions all the time. When I say, hey, give me that sandwich, right? I don't have to specify for you all the stuff that's in that sandwich, okay? Or if I would say, hey,
I need that piece of bread. Have another piece of bread.
right, yeah,
Some stuff
give me
in
those
between.
2 pieces of bread with peanut butter and jelly, like you don't have to say that, or let's play a game with an oblong ball on a 100-yard, field with 2 end zones that are 10 yards long, and then specify all the. You don't have to do that. Why? Because we've packaged all that thing up and called it football. Okay, it's one object that has a whole bunch of data about it. That's all kind of wrapped up into one thing, and it has the name of it and the equipment that you need for it, and there'd be like a list of the equipment and the rules and the number of play, right? All of this stuff, okay, that's packaged up. We do it all the time, okay? And so this is just the way that we represent objects in JavaScript, okay? So we are going to create some checkers, okay?
And then we're gonna get rid of peanut butter and jelly sandwich.
Not unless the checkers are peanut butter and jelly sandwiches.
Nice.
Oh wow.
Did you just do that?
Oh, I like that. Peanut butter and jelly sandwich checkers
And cells.
and red blood cells. Okay, I like it.
Yes.
Red blood cells are fighting the PB&Js. I'm down with that. All right, so
Maybe the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches can infiltrate and then make the red blood cells go on sugar high and then they crash. And
All
then,
right.
And sandwiches would win.
But they're not flying, so they can't crash.
let's do this. let's start at 0, okay? And we're going to go and while I is less than 32, okay?
I thought you were.
And this is actually the reason. This is one of the reasons why we zero index arrays is because we can say.
You're trying to get us in trouble.
I didn't even hear it.
I was less than
So,
pretty strong at that.
did she say I was the best teacher ever?
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured. Give her a
Oh,
bonus
yes,
point.
yes, yes.
All right. So we're going to iterate through this 32 times. Okay. One of the reasons why we zero index arrays is so we can do just this, right? So I start with 0 and I go all the way up to 31, which is 1 less than 32. Okay. All right. So checkers dot, and when we put something into an array, we push it in there. Okay. When we take something out, we pop it out. Okay. Push and pop. Yep. So we're going to push onto the array. We're going to push a checker. What should a checker have?
What if the checker didn't want to go?
Doesn't have a choice.
Force it against its
We
will?
are masters of its universe. What values do we need to have? What values do we need to have for our checker? Actually, let's make this a little simpler because iterating through this in a loop will be a little bit difficult. Let's just add them in here. Our first checker, right, is going to have a row of what?
This is 0.
Rows of nope, 1 because
Oh,
we decided to index our rows from 1 to 8,
okay.
right, instead of 0 to 7, right? I should say I decided.
Yeah.
Okay. Which once we start working with arrays, it seems a little bit weird. Okay. So row of 1, cell of what? Which cell does it go to? 2. Yep. And what else are we going to need?
The color.
The color, which will be
Why?
white.
What?
Yep.
What's
So
up?
we're
Color?
Yep. We're at the top.
White square, black square, which would be white, and then black square.
All right. And so
I'm pointing at it. It's not even there. If you
we're
can
going to
see
need
what
to
I
do
mean.
this a few more times, right? Okay. We're going to have a row of 1, cell of 4, 6, 8, right?
That's 7.
This will be row 2. You're right, that is 7. 8. And then on this one, it's going to be 1, 3, 5, 7, right? It's tracking? Yep. 1, 3, 5, 7. And then on the third row, oh, I missed the 1
Yeah, and the 3.
and the 5 and the 7. What in the world? 3, 5, 7. All right. Live coding. All right. And then on row 3, we need the same ones that we had before, 2, 4, 6, 8, right?
No tracking. Black and brown.
All right. So we'll just leave those. Those are our so now let's say that when we render the checkers, let's and we're actually drawing them out. Okay, we'll actually need a render checkers method. Okay, because we'll stop putting the checkers on the board when we draw the board. Okay, so that'll be the first thing that we're gonna stop doing is this method right here is going to actually not matter anymore. So don't put the checkers on the board. We're going to draw them all at one time in a minute.
I have some pens, but I don't have any paper.
I have some.
Sorry.
You just draw them right on your computer screen.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
With a Sharpie.
Yep, go for it. Yeah. All right, so I changed the draw, was it the draw row, the render cell. I changed the render cell method to not render the checkers inside the cells. Okay?
They got set free. On
Yep.
behavior.
So instead of having all these empty checkers in there that represent, the board state, right? We're just going to draw the board, and then we're going to go through one loop and draw all these checkers on there, okay? So let's go ahead and just do that now, and we'll do it right here. Function. render checkers. All right. So this function is going to need to loop through all of these checkers, right? So let's first just make sure that we're calling the function right and that we are actually getting in there. So console log.
I find it's kind of weird that it's called a console log, but it's not actually a console. It's not actually a log.
Right. All right. So if we refresh it, it's not getting called because we haven't called anywhere. So, but we do have this document ready, which reminds us that's where things start, right? So let's go to our document ready method, which is over on board.js. Okay, and here we say, hey, now that we've rendered the board and we've added the toggle method to all the black cells, let's render the checkers. All right, refresh that. And it should say, okay, that we're rendering the checkers. All right, so let's go render them. That is a good practice. Just make sure you're calling the method, because I don't know how many times I've written a method that I thought worked, and then I'm like, why is it not working? And I realized, oh, it's not even being called, right? So, and of course, at this point, I've already tried things that were more complicated than that, like trying to figure it out, and then I realized, oh, I knew it was working, it just wasn't, or it would have worked if it had just been called. All right, so here we're going to iterate through our checkers. So we're going to have an index called I, and it'll start with a value of 0. And when will we need to stop? Well, we need to continue to go as long as I is what? Less than
8, 9,
10.
100.
55 and a
Seven.
half.
7,
Well, we need to go through all the checkers, right?
8.
Do we only have 8 checkers on the board?
Oh,
36. I don't know.
28.
32.
It's actually 32,
I
but
don't know.
there's an easier number. There's an easier number to check against. However many checkers we have, the length of the checkers are
Oh.
right.
Mm.
In other words,
Makes sense.
do this for every checker. Yeah, way easier than saying 32. And then, so start with 0 and do this for every value up to the last checker. Okay?
It was 24 checkers.
There are 32. I think maybe it's 24, but it doesn't really matter. There's checkers.length checkers on the board, and in this case, there's actually going to be you're right. There's going to be 12 because I've only put the white checkers in. Console.log. Yeah, you are right. It is 24. See? That's why we use things like checkers.length. Because we're like, why is it broken? I'm getting area out of bounds exception. I'm sure there's 32. And then realize later you're like, there's not 32. All right. So first we're just going to print out the checker that we're looking at. That's it.
I
Okay?
don't have a printer.
So
I have one next door.
Okay. So we do have a printer somewhere.
I think Sierra has
all right.
but
So
not-
what do we got here? We got rendering checkers. I've got checker 1, or the first checker, which is checker 0, right? And it has cell of 1, 2, 1, 4, 1, 6, 1, 8, 2, 1. Okay, that's exactly what we expected, right? Let me show you. Have I showed you guys that you can actually type commands in here? So I can type checkers, and then I can see that there's the value of all my checkers. It's actually really handy. Or you can do something. You can do another thing. You can actually tell it to do things like render the board, or
do my voice.
render the checkers. But of course, all right. So that just re-rendered all the checkers. Okay. Of course, we're not actually putting them on the board right now. So, but we'll get to that in just a minute. All right.
Can you do my homework for me?
It's not as smart as you. You wouldn't want it doing your homework. All right. So, yeah.
You get some people questioning that.
All right. So now we're going through, and we've got a checker. Okay. And the checker has a row and a cell. Okay? So we want to take the checker and render the checker inside of that row and cell. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So how do we reference the cell that we're trying to get? How can we identify it using jQuery? The cell number? What's the cell number? Or the cell ID, I think is what you're referring to. If we look, let's inspect the board. Let's inspect this first one. How do we reference that particular div? So I've got a div,
By its name.
not its name. There's no name on there, but you're close.
It says George. I clearly. Come here, George. Come here.
So how do I get some in this cell?
No. That one's Bob. That one's George.
Anyway, Luke, how can I identify this cell?
You could say cell 1, 2.
Cell 1, 2, not exactly, but close. Cell, hyphen 1, hyphen 2, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're going to get it by its ID, right? That's the important thing. So I've got this cell. So $, and what do we use to reference cell numbers? Pound sign, or I'm sorry, IDs. Yep, the pound sign. So I want cell hyphen, and remember we got to use string interpolation. It'll be, whoops.
It's a herpes mean.
Bob's good.
This is going to be our checker. All right. So all I did just there, right there, was I just assigned the checker that we're looking at to a value of checker. It's just a little easier to think about when, rather than saying checkers brackets I dot row. So checker dot row and hyphen checker dot cell.
I'm wiping mine.
All right. Now let's just do something to make sure, just to see that that this is maybe working. We'll do something a little bit crazy, but we'll just say hide those cells for right now. Okay. If those cells disappear, we know we've identified the cells correctly. Okay.
Run away, cells. Run for your life.
So it runs, and there we go. We just removed all the black cells from the first 3 rows. Okay. So we've correctly identified the cells. Okay. Or at least if we wrongly identified them, we wrongly identified them in a particularly fortuitous way, which is not likely, but we did identify all the black cells, and we want to put checkers in all of them. So let's do that. So down here we have the code that we, for rendering a checker, okay? And if we look at this, if the cell was the row was less than 3, we were rendering a white checker. Here we're rendering a black checker, and here we were rendering hidden checkers. Now we're not going to need hidden checkers anymore, okay? Because we've got a certain number of checkers that are in this array that we're going to be actually moving around, right? So if that's the case, then these are the only 2 types of checkers we're going to render. What's the only difference between those 2? The color. And the color is stored on the what? On the checker object, right? In that list, the checker itself has a value. Right? Let's go back over here to our console. Right? See, the checkers know what color they are. Right? So then we can just pass in render checker, and we'll pass in the color. And we'll replace this with color. Does that make sense?
It doesn't actually make sense.
I
Only the
would
government can make
prefer
sense.
it to make dollars. Not gonna lie.
Not bad. All right. So we're going to take the render checker, and we're going to add it to the HTML. And we need checker dot color, right? And let's see if that works. Boom. Okay. So we've got white cell or white checkers now.
Uncle.
Okay. So we can continue down this road. Okay. But here's what's remarkably different about this approach is we now have this thing, this data structure that is, small, and can be easily transported, back and forth to the server. Like we can send this JSON object, right, back to the server, and say, hey, store this, and it will save. It will literally saves this text, okay, in the server. And if you think about it, in just this text, of course, we need to add all the black cells too. But I've essentially, like in just that little bit of text, I have defined a whole checkers game, okay? And that can be saved on the server, and then it can be loaded on a different computer. You could save it, maybe go play on your phone later, right? And then switch back and forth as long as you knew which game you were referring to, okay? All right, so that's what we're moving to, and we'll continue down that road of making this progressively more. It's called in computer ease. It's called serializable, right? So we're making this serializable so that it can
so
be.
you could eat it for breakfast.
We are all
It's with an
technically
S.
serial killers.
Ow.
What?
Ow.
Oh,
But yes,
You're a Bob killer.
it's serial
I'm
in
a
terms
turkey
of
killer.
yes, one thing after the other. But the reason why they call it serializable is that you can turn it into a stream of bits and send it over a wire. So, all right. So I'm going to leave it to you guys to implement
Give it to
the
somebody
black
else.
checkers. Okay? So that's your assignment. Okay? And then we've got the rest of class to if you're stuck anywhere. I want to see where you guys are and get you moving forward. Okay? And I think, I want to see where you are, and then maybe on Monday we might actually have sort of a catch-up day of getting everybody caught up to the end of the most
What
recent
if we
video.
prefer mayonnaise or
Mustard day? A mustard day wouldn't be so bad, but no mayo. Mayo is not okay. Sorry. No.
Okay, I just want to show off.
Yeah, we can't have Christian fellowship if you believe in mayonnaise. So, with that said, yep, I'll try to close this before I do any more blasphemy.